And we are live. Welcome, mystery and thriller fans. I'm your on-air host and author, Sara DiVello, and I am so excited to welcome back tonight Julia Dahl, here to give us the inside scoop on her brand new book out now, I Dreamed of Falling. Julia, welcome back to Mystery and Thriller Mavens. Tell us about this book.
Hi, thank you for having me. Hello, everybody. Well, I Dreamed of Falling is a mystery. It's a family drama. It's about a reporter the only reporter at a tiny newspaper in a small Hudson Valley town whose girlfriend, the mother of his 4-year-old son, is found dead on a hillside. And the police immediately think, oh, it's an overdose because she had some history with drugs and she was at a place where drugs were being used. But he does not believe it was an overdose. And so he starts to investigate what actually happened, and turns out that she has a lot of secrets and pretty much everybody around him is hiding a whole bunch of stuff.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
I cannot wait to chat all about it and hear about your creative process and talk about some of these incredible blurbs. And so first, I just want to welcome everyone because we are streaming to 7 different destinations across Facebook and YouTube. So hey, mystery and thriller loving friends, no matter where you're watching from, you're in the right time. This is the right place. It is Mystery Monday because Mondays can be murder. We are going to make it a little less painful and get your week off to a killer start. So if you're new here, welcome, friends. And if you've been here before, you know the drill. Just get those questions going in the comments and I will get them right over to Julia Dahl. Sharon is joining us from YouTube saying, good evening, girls. Good evening to you, Miss Sharon. So good to have you with us. Robin's joining us from Facebook saying, hello, all from sunny Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I'm so glad that it's sunny in Idaho. It is not, it's been cloudy where I am, Robin. So good to have you. Okay. Now, Julia, let's dive right in. Where did you get the idea for this story? Take us to that inception.
Right. It's funny because most of my novels, my 4 previous novels, all were inspired by stories I wrote as a reporter. But this one was inspired by something much more personal. Basically, when I gave birth to my son, which is getting on 9 years ago. It was, if you're a parent, this, like the infant time is often really hard. And it was really hard for me. I felt really kind of useless and like a failure. And I didn't know how to handle this tiny little 5-pound bundle that I didn't know how to deal with. And I was really stressed and depressed. And I remember, in the sort of darkest times thinking, God, maybe somebody could just take this away from me. It really felt like a burden. And at the time, I was lucky in that I had my sister-in-law who lived nearby, and she was like, let me help. And she just kind of swooped in, and whenever I needed anything, she was there. And so once I sort of got my sea legs as a mom, I started thinking, well, what if instead of, that's how every novel starts. Like, what if instead of being 38 and in a stable relationship, like I was when I had my child, what if I was, early 21 and was not in a, stable relationship, and it was an unplanned pregnancy and I wasn't financially stable, and what would that be like? And then if somebody, say my mother-in-law, said, let me take over, I'll help you. And she really took over, and I really let her. And because, parenting an infant and a toddler is really hard. And a lot of times it's really boring and tedious and difficult. And so I created this character of Ashley, who gave birth and had kind of a traumatic birth experience. And her mother-in-law just said, let me take care of the baby. And then 4 years later, Ashley realizes, I don't really have a relationship with my child. And that's sort of where, and Ashley is the victim. So basically it's not giving anything away to know that Ashley dies at the very beginning of the story. And her family, the father of her son and his mother are trying to figure out what happened. And it's really a story about a couple generations of a family all living in this tiny town where you really can't ever escape your past.
I loved that. And I want to talk about the setting because the setting is its own character. And Julia, you live upstate New York. The book takes place in upstate New York. Tell us about why you set the book there and why that was so important to you.
Yeah. So I've never lived in a small town, or I now live in a small town. I live in a a little village of literally 3,000 people. And like, I grew up in Fresno, California, which is not a huge city, but there's like 500,000 people. And, my high school had 3,000 people in it. Right. So all of a sudden I moved to this, and then I lived in New York City for 20 years. So I moved to this town, and I start to realize, like, everybody knows everybody. And not just do they know everybody in everybody's business, but they like knew their parents and their parents' business and their grandparents and their grandparents' business. And I realized, like, if you grow up in a place like that, I mean, for some people, really is a really wonderful experience. Like, you really feel like you're just surrounded by people who love and care about you and know you. But then I felt like, well, what if you made mistakes? Like, what if you got a DUI, or you got in a fight with somebody? Like, you can never outrun that because everybody knows your business. So I thought, I really want to set a mystery in a place where everybody knows everybody, but still there are secrets. And then, yeah, exactly. And that's sort of where I live, in a little Hudson Valley town. And that's where the story's set.
I love that. And I love that small town dynamic of, everybody knows everybody, but do they?
Yeah, exactly.
Really?
Exactly.
John, welcome to the conversation. Joining us from Northeast Ohio. John, so good to have you with us tonight. So Julia, let's talk about this blurb right here on the front cover of the book from none other than the incredible Gillian Flynn. Tell us about that.
Well, I'm really lucky, or it's sort of a strange coincidence, in that my very first job out of college, I was an intern at Entertainment Weekly back in, I'm revealing my age, 1999. And I would like make photocopies for people. And Gillian Flynn at that time was a TV assistant there. She's a few years older than me. And I would like literally make photocopies for her. And she was very nice,
Oh my
and,
God.
we knew each other a little, but not well. And then, I moved on and she moved on. And I, maybe 6 or 7 years later, I was at a Barnes and Noble and saw her book, the first book, Sharp Objects. And if you guys have read it, you know that the book was a super interesting cover. It was all black with a silver razor blade on it. And I remember being so drawn to that book. I was like, oh my God, what is that? I have to read it. I picked it up and I was like, Gillian, wait a minute. Do I know this girl? And I looked and I was like, that's the girl I used to make photocopies for. So I read it, loved it. And it was a really formative moment for me reading it, because I remember I had written a novel, but I couldn't publish it, or like I couldn't find anybody to publish it. I felt really like, oh, what am I doing? I knew I wanted to write a novel, but I wanted to be a writer, but it wasn't working out. And yet I hadn't realized, like, somehow I hadn't put together until I read Sharp Objects, that what I love to read are mysteries and thrillers. And that's what I should write. So I read Sharp Objects and I was like, that's the book I want to write. Like, I want it to be dark and like, sort of fast paced with like a flawed female heroine. So I wrote what ended up being my first book, Invisible City, and I emailed her, or maybe Facebook messaged her, really. And it was before Gone Girl. So like, she was a writer, but she wasn't the biggest writer on planet Earth, right? So I emailed her and I was like, hey, I don't know if you remember me. I was your intern 10 years ago. Do you have any advice? That I've written this novel, and I gave her like a little bit of background. I said, do you have any advice for a young writer? And she was like, the novel sounds good. Why don't you email my agent? And I did. And her agent became my agent. And even though we don't, I wouldn't call her a close friend by any means, but she's always been so supportive of my career. She blurbed my first book, and whenever I write a book, I send it to her. And this was the first time since then that I always send it to her, because like, when you're ready, you send the books to people and you hope maybe they like them. And she sent me an email a few months before the book came out. I mean, I like was screaming when I got the email. She was like, I can't stop reading this book. It's so great. And I was like, ah! So she gave me a blurb, and then she and I last Monday did a talk for Poison Pen, and it was great because, first of all, you don't get to see Gillian Flynn talking about her work that much. Yeah, and it was really cool to hear her talk about the work she's done before, the work she's working on now, her work in TV. It was very cool, and I am forever indebted to her.
Well, let's take a peek at this blurb. I'm going to pull it up so we can all read it together. Gillian Flynn raves, I Dreamed of Falling is one of those rare novels in which you feel the pulse of every single character down to the mail carrier. It is an uncompromising look at love and its complications, and a frank, sometimes burning story about the tricky business of learning how to be a grown-up. Oh, and it's all wrapped up in a blistering mystery. With I Dreamed of Falling, Julia Dahl proves she is simply one of the best thriller writers working today. I mean, wow.
Right? I know. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
not only to have a blurb from Gillian Flynn, but to have that
I
blurb
know.
from
I
anyone,
know.
but to have that blurb from Gillian Flynn, it just is like, I mean, I would get that tattooed on my face.
I
Like
know,
that,
right? I was like, well, I can die happy now.
you can die happy
I
now.
know.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. There's nowhere
It's
else
true.
to go, Julia.
This is going on my headstone.
Chisel it on my headstone out there with the tiny little hammer, because, and don't miss a single word, don't miss a
Right.
single comma. Like, that is just so incredible. But the really cool thing is she's not the only one raving. Library Journal awarding you a starred review. Let's take a peek at that one. They said this devastating crime novel will appeal to readers who appreciate tragic family stories and fans of Julia Keller's Belle Elkins series, again awarding you a star. And they're not the only ones who did. Publishers Weekly also coughing up that hard-earned star, raving about your ability to, hold on, I'm going to pop it up so we can all read it. Your gift for suspense. They said that will keep readers flipping pages in the end, it's her finely wrought characters that they will remember. It's an impressive leap forward from the author's previous book, more plot-driven efforts, and the last book was nothing to sneeze at. So, Julia, I want to pause here and talk about those finely wrought characters. So specifically, your background as a reporter, did covering real people, did that help your ability to, provide finely wrought characters, or
Right.
tell us about that and what you think it takes to create a character, characters that get you a star review?
It's such a good question. I mean, I feel like being a writer, like, is just such an exercise, and a reader, but it's an exercise in empathy, right? Like, I get curious about people. I start to imagine, well, what if this person existed? Often my characters are based on, like, I'll see somebody and I'll think that I don't even know, or that I only see in passing, and I'll think, I wonder what their life is like. Something about them sort of piques my interest, and then I'll start making up stories about them. And I'm just a observant person. I'm kind of the joke that I teach journalism, and I always joke to my journalism students that journalism is a license to be nosy as a career. Like, you get to just ask people questions that would be maybe considered inappropriate in other circumstances. And I kind of bring that into my life as a writer too. I mean, I try to do it as kindly and in an most appropriate manner as possible, but I totally ask people questions, and when I meet them, I'll sort of, I hope it doesn't feel like grilling, but I want to know about people. I'm fascinated by people. And as a reporter, you just get really good at sort of forcing yourself to talk to people. Like, you can't be shy about that. You have to just say, I'm going to knock on that door and ask that person a question. And usually what the secret that is that most people are really really willing to talk about themselves. They're flattered to be asked. People want to be seen, and that was one of the things that that was surprising to me as a reporter, because I was shy. I mean, I'm like a social person, but it's hard to just knock on a stranger's door or call up a stranger. And soon I realized that people were really flattered that I wanted to talk to them. And so I try to remember that. And when I'm creating a character, if there's somebody I know who has a similar job, or somebody who maybe is in a similar circumstance, I'll ask them questions. And then also, it's just, I mean, I'm such a reader, and every book you read creates more empathy in you. You learn about new people. And so I feel like I'm always building that muscle as a reader, and that helps me as a writer.
Ooh, that is so interesting, because one thing that I've been thinking a lot about lately, having just launched a children's book festival, is the importance of young people reading.
Yeah.
So I recently learned that 40% of first graders in the United States enter first grade reading below grade level, which probably surprises none of us, but it's really actually sad and problematic. And here's why. I'm also noticing a lack of empathy in adults. And I'm wondering if the dwindling interest in reading and the lack, along all ages, and the lack of empathy for people who are at an adult reading level and maybe weren't lifelong readers, could be correlated, because the one thing that I've always loved about reading is that it is a chance to walk in someone else's shoes that I will never walk, and to live their life and see the world through their eyes. And maybe it's hard and maybe it's painful, but maybe that's necessary. Renee, yeah, thank you. Yes, feeling this as well, that it is sad.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, and fiction gets a really, I think, incorrect rap, in that, like, I was at the library a while ago and I ran into like a woman I knew, and we were both looking at the shelves, and I said something like, "Oh, what are you reading right now?" And she said something, and it was I don't know, a nonfiction book of some kind, maybe self-helpy. And I said, "Oh, I pretty much only read novels." And she said, "Oh, well, I try to read stuff where I can learn something." And I remember thinking, that's really sad, because like,
you're not learning something.
You learn so much about people from fiction. I mean, what is it? They say art is the lie that tells the truth, right? Like, right? And I feel like learning other people's stories, it forces you into their mind, and it forces you to feel what they feel. And I mean, nonfiction absolutely has a place, and I've read some brilliant nonfiction, but for me, fiction is really where like you build your empathy.
Oh, I love this conversation. Renee saying, I need books. Renee, same. Robin saying, I imagine if you treat people with kindness and honesty when knocking on their doors, and when they read the story you write about them, you become trusted. Integrity matters. Absolutely.
True. And then if they read the story and and you represent them incorrectly or poorly, then it undermines, obviously, their trust in you. They're not going to let you report on them again, but also their trust in media. And that's, a big problem right now, right? And every individual reporter is responsible for that. Like I teach reporting, and I teach my students that as a reporter, you have a huge amount of power, right? Somebody is giving you their story and you're the one telling it, right? You can make them look one way or another. That's a lot of responsibility, and you have to take that really seriously.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I think about this a lot, both as, as a reader of news, and also just having written a book about a pioneering female journalist at the turn of the century, and what that was like for her to feel the weight and the sacred burden and the responsibility and the honor of telling people's stories and getting the story right.
Yeah.
Ooh, Sharon is a good question. Julia, do you have a favorite character in this novel?
I mean, I love them all, but I think my favorite character is the little boy. So that Ashley and Roman have a 4-year-old son. His name is Mason. And I loved writing him because I just, I like children. I'm actually working on a piece about children in crime fiction. And I think that children really force us to, like, when something bad happens, you have to tell a child, you have to really simplify, right? You have to break it down to what it truly is, what is real, what is not real. And in this book, the characters have a hard time figuring out how to talk to the little boy about his mother dying. I mean, it's terrible. And they mess up a lot, and he asks these amazing questions, and and I just loved, but then also they have the ability, kids, to sort of lift out of that craze, that trauma, right? Like for a little bit, that they'll almost like forget, they'll be sad, and then something will catch their eye, some silliness or some movie or some cookie, and they can like find joy again for a moment. And that can be really inspirational. So I think I have to say Mason's my favorite character, even though he's 4.
That's so interesting, because actually when I was going over all of your reviews, I noticed that First Clue actually specifically honed in on the writing of your writing of that 4-year-old character. And I remember thinking, that is so interesting. So I just want to pop it up so we can all read it here. First Clue says, all of the oops, hold on, let me scroll down there. The comments are going so fast. All of the characters are memorable, but 4-year-old Mason and his bottomless, bewildered grief are particularly well drawn. This is a family and a story to remember. And I've never attempted to write a child, and I don't think I could. So that was so interesting to me that you were like, I'm going to write this 4-year-old,
I
and that
mean,
he
I
would.
don't think I would have done it without having had access to a 4-year-old. Like, my son is now almost 9. But, so, you don't have to write what you know, but for me, at least, like, it felt organic to write about a little boy.
Yeah.
And I'm enjoying that I now have that access to kids, because I was never like, I mean, I love my child, but I'm not like, I never babysat. Like, I don't really like kids that much. Like, you're not gonna find me like, hey, can I like take your kid for, like, I'm not that interested. But now that I have my own kid, I see how interesting kids can be, and how rich and, like, unusual their perspectives can be. So, like, the book that I'm working on now, it just starting, is going to have kids who are, like, maybe a little older, maybe like 5th, 6th grade. And I'm enjoying that, like, now I feel like I can write, like, a new set of characters that I didn't feel like I could write before.
Ooh, Sharon saying, I could never stop reading. I always bring books to my friends' children. They all have pretty cool bookcases. Ooh, very, very. I never thought about children's bookcases. Yeah, this is such a fascinating conversation, and I liked what you said about having to get down. Really break it down when you're writing.
Yeah.
You're writing something. Renee saying your discussion at the Poison Pen bookstore was wonderful.
Thank
Oh,
you.
I love that you went. I would love that you went to that, Robin. Renee, excuse me. John is joining us from Northeast Ohio. Hi, John. So good to have you. I also wanted to talk about some of this other praise, specifically the LA Times. Congratulations on that.
That was so cool.
Yay, with skill and compassion. Again, going back to that empathy that you're talking about, Dahl has created a heart-wrenching drama of family dysfunction and small town gentrification that makes I Dreamed of Falling a story greater than the sum of all its parts. I really loved that. Tell us about specifically that, how you undertook writing a story about these various parts, but that came
Right.
out to being more than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and every time I write a book, I try to write a better book than the one before, and I always just try to
Ooh.
write the book I want to read. And so much of what I've been thinking about in the last 4 years since COVID has been family dynamics, right? I feel like COVID made families, it was so hard on family. I have all kinds of families, like, at all, because families look completely different house to house. And I knew so many families who broke apart during COVID, who went through so much strife because, one person is, it's like, screw this, I'm going to the bar. And their husband is like, you can't come near me if you're not vaccinated. And I mean, like, everybody had a different idea of, like, or a different reaction to the pandemic. And often those people lived in the same house. And that made me start thinking about, like, how we treat our family and how different we can be from our family, and how that can create so much strife. And then, the LA Times talked a little bit about the idea of small town gentrification. And it is, and it's funny, I hadn't thought of it that way, but it's true. Like, I lived for 20 years in New York City, and we talked a lot about the gentrifying areas of Brooklyn. I mean, frankly, I was a gentrifier, and I guess I am too, in this town, where, it's a town where people have been living for generations. And now, pre and post pandemic, lots of sort of city dwellers, from New York and Brooklyn, are coming up and buying the houses of the elderly people who are leaving and going to homes or whatever. And it's changing the makeup of the town, for better, for worse. It depends on who you ask, right? The housing prices are going up, and it means that people who maybe grew up here are not able to buy a house. And I'm part of that. So, and I think it's important to, I try not to be didactic about any of this, right? Like, it's, especially with the gentrification, like, I hadn't even thought of that, but that's exactly what's happening, is that, so I try to just paint the picture of what's happening, and think about,
Mm.
for and show that through the character's eyes.
Which is your reporter training, right? You're not there to make a statement about it. You're there
Right.
to present the story, to tell
Right.
the story as objectively and honestly
Right.
and compassionately as you can, and then to let the reader draw their own conclusion.
Right, right. And then of course, like with reporting, like my biases and my values come through in the stories I choose to write, I mean, right.
Mm.
And the people I choose to interview. And so of course with this book, the fact that I decided to write about, a family, that had an unplanned pregnancy, that where there was drugs involved, these were things that I was thinking about, that had happened to either people I knew, or that was something that I wanted to explore. I could have chosen to write a totally different book, right? About a totally different, more stable, intact, frankly, less flawed family. But frankly, like, I don't
Mm.
know, that feel like, who wants to read a story about like a, everybody's doing great family? That's not how crime fiction works.
Oh my goodness. You guys, the book is out now, and you can order I Dreamed of Falling through our favorite woman-owned independent bookstore. That is
Woohoo!
Murder by the Book. So
We
whether
love
you're
you, Murder by the Book.
Yay! Whether you are watching with us on Facebook or on YouTube, here is that link. And you too can get your mitts on I Dreamed of Falling with this gorgeous blurb from Gilead Flynn, a blistering mystery in the words of Queen Flynn. Get your mitts on Mason and Ashley and all of these incredible characters that Julia has brought to the page with such empathy and compassion and truth. Renee saying, I bought I Dreamed of Falling and I will read it next weekend. Yay!
Thank you, Renee.
Renee, let us know what you think. All the good tea is spilled in Mystery and Thriller Haven after the show. So make sure you leave that review. I'm very curious. Renee's been with me, I think, all 4.5 years, right, Renee? So let me know what you think, my fellow dog mom out there. Julia, I did want to ask you about, as a journalist and a teacher of journalists and a writer of fiction, what do you think that those of us who have not been a journalist or gotten a degree in journalism, what can we learn from journalists that we
Oh,
can
wow. What a great question. I mean, I think one of the things that journalists do really well is, well, if you're a writer, journalists are good at not being too precious about their work, especially their first draft,
Ooh,
right? Like somebody's behind you going, you need to get that copy out. Go, go, go. Right, right, right. And so I can't have like the most beautiful prose. Like, I just need to get the story out. And I think that privileging of story is really important, right? That, like, I'm not super interested in how many words you can use to describe the color of the sky, right? I want to know what happens, right? But also, I think one of the things that journalists are good at, that fiction writers can be better at, is research. And I don't mean research necessarily in the traditional sense of like, oh, I'm writing about something that happened at the turn of the century. I need to read a lot of newspapers. I need to read, but I mean also researching your own fictional characters. So thinking about what did their childhood look like? What's, in their Netflix queue? I guess that's a dated reference. But, what was their first date like with their husband, or what was their first day of school like? And using those, like using sort of character research to write about, like, if you're writing one day and, oh, I don't know what to write about, just be like, I'm going to write a scene with my character and her mom when she was 10, because it's going to help you understand that person. And probably you'll just throw it away, but that's okay, because you're still learning about your character, and that's going to come out in the next scene.
Ooh, I love this. I love this. And I am guilty of that preciousness. I'm like,
Yeah.
she is not quite ready yet. She must be, she's
Right.
she's in repose.
Right.
I refer, of course, to my draft.
Yes.
She was resting for her after her 17th nap of the day.
I mean, I get that advice. My favorite piece of writing advice is from Megan Abbott, and she just says, write badly.
Oh my God. Oh, you mean Megan Abbott, who had this to say? Hold on, I'm scrolling back. Megan was on the show for her last book as well. Megan said, Julia Dahl's I Dreamed of Falling is both a riveting crime novel and an intimate and wrenching portrait of a family struggling to find its footing and the tragedy that exposes all the desperation humming. I loved that. Beneath.
So good.
Vivid and haunting and not to be missed. Megan was on for her last book, or was it the book before as well? So it was so fun to see her pop up with these words of praise and to know for your book and to know. And again, so she said, just write badly.
She says, write badly. And like your first draft, and I tell my students this with journalism too, your first draft is going to be bad. Write it anyway. You can't get to the second draft if you don't have the first draft, you know?
Oh, I like that. Hashtag vicious. Hashtag merciless. I love it. Robin saying, we try hard to be present and support our favorite authors and sites like Poison Pen and Murder by the Book. Oh, thank you so much for that, Robin. Jane, welcome to the conversation. Let us know what you think. Yes, absolutely. Okay. We have Kim joining us from Facebook saying, she will be contacting Murder by the Book to place her order. Will you be visiting the store anytime soon?
I don't have any plans to. It's a little hard to get away with my life, the kid and all that stuff. But I'm doing a bunch of events basically that I can drive to. So I'm going all up and down the Hudson Valley. But I did go to Murder by the Book for my second book, and it was great. I mean, it's just such a cool store. It's so great. So never say never. I mean, I will have a paperback of this book coming out in a year. So maybe then.
Yay. And if you order the book and DM me your receipt, I will get a signed Mystery and Thriller Mavens book plate to Julia, and she will sign it and send it to you. And yes. I'm not gonna lie, they're pretty cool. See my cool hand-drawn lady, mysterious lady up here. She is.
I like her. I like her.
Yes, exactly. She's a reporter. She's a mysterious reporter. Totally. And I will get you this logo on my beautiful book plates. It says Mystery and Thriller Mavens, and then Julia will write. I will send it to Julia, and she will sign it and send it to you. So just DM me your, and that's for anybody. DM me your receipts, and I will get you a signed and personalized, not just signed, personalized to you, Kim, or to anyone that you want. It's signed to. You got to start thinking ahead for holiday shopping.
Right. It's true. Books, personalized books. What's a better gift than that?
Exactly. We've got the Jewish holidays coming up. We've got Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. We got to start thinking ahead to Christmas and Hanukkah. Halloween is an unknown gift giving date. Everyone should be giving gifts on Halloween. There's lots of things to celebrate.
Especially like creepy books.
Exactly. Robin saying, I would assume a reporter with integrity learns to report the truth without too much personal feelings, even though that must be very difficult.
Yeah. I mean, I sometimes used to say that because I was a crime reporter. So, I mean, I was constantly just sort of coming in after terrible things had happened. And it's a little bit akin to being a police officer or an emergency room doctor or something, where you have to have a little bit of like, I would call it like a missing chip, like something in your brain where you're able to sort of face really kind of the horrors of the world and not have it destroy you. And so I would interview people who, whose family members had just died or who'd been traumatized or something. And somehow I was able to take their stories in and empathize with them and write, hopefully something that was of value to others and that honored them. But I didn't go home and just like cry all day. Right. So it's a little, I feel like we have some built-in, like I said, missing chip or something, because a police officer has to do that. An emergency room doctor, like you can't, if you were constantly reliving the trauma of the people that you see every day in those kinds of jobs, I don't know how you go on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, welcome to the conversation, saying those short character sketches are useful and good practice. Nothing is wasted. Oh, I love
that. It's true. I should teach a course called Fiction for Journalists, because I truly believe that pretty much every journalist has a novel in them. And so many and it's just about figuring out the time and the permission, really like giving yourself permission to say, I'm going to write this novel. And one of the things I teach is that use your research skills as a journalist to write fiction. And Gillian Flynn actually has a quote. I don't know where she said this. She must have either written it somewhere. where she talks about, if you've read Gone Girl, one of the things that everybody remembered from Gone Girl is that cool girl speech where Amy talks about, I tried to be a cool girl. So Gillian says that speech came as a writing exercise, that she was just sort of trying to get into Amy. I know. And it became like the most famous part of the book.
Yeah. Oh my God, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I know.
Kim is excited for signed book plate. Yeah, Kim, I'm going to make it happen for you anytime. I got you. She says she will be sure to do that. Hooray. Someone was saying, I scrolled past it, now I can't find it, that they love the term shitty first draft. It was Anne Lamott in Bird by Bird, my favorite book about writing, who said, just give yourself permission to write a shitty first draft. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Especially with a novel, or even a short story, you really have to kind of at least get to the end so that you have like the skeleton, even if there are missing pieces and it's, falling apart in one place. If you have a whole, it allows you then you can start to polish and stuff.
Oh my gosh, I love that. All right, y'all, we are out of time. Time flies when you are having this much fun. So here again is that link. Whether you're watching with us on Facebook or YouTube, you can order. The book is out now, and you can order from our favorite woman-owned. You got to shop woman-owned independent bookstore. I will get you signed book plates, customize how you like them. I always like to have the author say something scandalous. To Kim, I'll never tell. To Susie, your secret is safe with me.
I love that.
I'll take your oh my God, I have people write. I had Brad Thor write to my inspiration, Sara. He's a Navy SEAL, really tough dude. Sara, I'd be nothing without you. It's so fun.
I love that.
Sara, please don't tell anyone I lost the arm wrestling contest. There's so much fun. Rob's saying, ooh, Sara, I'd love a book plate signed by you for my mission accomplished. Okay, so we have this fun thing at Mystery and Familiar Neighbors where we do challenge, gauntlet cast, challenge accepted. So I cast Robin a challenge to go get one of the authors that we had on here virtually. She was going to see him at a conference, and she had to get a signed book plate signed from him, referencing Mystery and Thriller Neighbors, and he accidentally signed it to Sara, even though it was for Robin. So now we have a snafu challenge as well. That would be so fun. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for being here for Mystery Monday. And I hope the days of the week and the pages fly by swiftly. Julia, congratulations on I Dreamed of Falling out now. Y'all have a killer week. I'll be back with you next Monday.